Alien girl offered the human a small token, only later revealing why her counsel rose for him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to the main character. Ethan Miller was just an ordinary guy, a security officer on one of Earth's many orbital stations. He never expected much from life, just doing his job and getting by. He had no grand dreams of fame or fortune. His days consisted of patrolling hallways, checking the cameras, and responding to minor incidents. But everything changed when he was assigned to a diplomatic event that would bring him face to face with the ruling class of a powerful alien species. The Tan Dominion, a vast empire spanning several star systems, was sending a delegation to Earth, and as part of the security detail, Ethan was tasked with ensuring the safety of the guests. When the Tan Queen herself, Queen Nasara, arrived at the Earth Embassy, Ethan was given the responsibility of guarding her. At first, it seemed like just another boring assignment. But there was something different about this diplomatic mission. The Tan Dominion's culture was built on respect, power, and tradition, and the Queen was revered as a near goddess. However, it wasn't Queen Nasara who Ethan first encountered. Instead, it was her royal proxy, Aliana, a biosynthetic clone who appeared to be nothing more than a stand-in for the real Queen. Aliana was physically identical to the Queen, her crimson skin and silver hair shining brightly under the lights. Her posture was regal, and her blue eyes seemed to pierce through him with an air of mystery. But despite her beauty and authority, there was something about Aliana that felt different. She didn't carry herself with the same cold detachment as most of the other officials. There was warmth in her demeanor, a subtle vulnerability that Ethan couldn't ignore. During their first meeting, Aliana offered Ethan a small token, a delicate silver pendant with an intricate design. She explained that it was a symbol of peace, a gift for his service. At first, Ethan thought little of it. A simple gesture, a token of goodwill. But as the days went by, he began to notice the weight behind the gesture. Aliana's actions seemed to hint at something more, something deeper than just a mere formality. The pendant wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a sign of respect, a recognition of Ethan's role in this strange diplomatic dance between humans and aliens. What Ethan didn't know was that this small token would lead him down a path he never could have imagined. The Tan Council, the ruling body of the Tan Dominion, had taken notice of his actions. They saw something in Ethan that they had never expected to find in a human. His courage, his integrity, and his unwavering dedication to duty had earned him the respect of those who ruled over entire star systems. Aliana, the royal proxy, was the first to understand this. She had watched Ethan closely, and what she saw in him was more than just a human bodyguard. She saw a man who embodied the values of the Tan Dominion, values of loyalty, bravery, and honor. Her people, who had long viewed humans as insignificant, began to change their perspective. Ethan's simple acts of kindness, his unwavering commitment to the mission, and his refusal to back down in the face of danger had earned him a place in the hearts of the Tan people. The small token Aliana gave him was just the beginning. As the days unfolded, Ethan would find himself rising in stature, not just as a security officer, but as a symbol of what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of powerful and ancient species. Little did he know, this journey would not only change his life, but also reshape the way the Tan Dominion viewed humanity forever. As Ethan spent more time with Aliana, the royal proxy, he began to notice subtle changes in his perception of her. Initially, he had seen her as nothing more than a bodyguard's duty, a figure of royalty who held little significance beyond her role as the Queen's stand-in. But now, something deeper had begun to surface. Aliana, with her graceful movements and delicate but determined demeanor, was starting to reveal a side of herself that few others saw. She wasn't just a clone. She wasn't merely a substitute for the real Queen Nasara. She was her own person, with thoughts, feelings, and a quiet strength that Ethan admired. One evening, after a long day of diplomatic meetings, Ethan found himself walking alongside Aliana in the royal gardens of the embassy. The soft hum of the distant city could be heard, but the air was still and calming, with the scent of fresh flowers lingering in the cool night. Aliana, as usual, was silent, her steps measured, yet the tranquility between them felt natural. "You don't have to be so formal with me," Ethan said, his voice breaking the silence. Aliana glanced at him, her eyes, as usual, full of a distant, unreadable expression. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone soft but filled with a subtle curiosity. "I mean, we're not at a ceremony or a meeting. I'm just Ethan, and you're Aliana," he replied, shrugging. "We can talk like normal people." She stopped walking and looked at him for a moment, the usual coolness in her expression softening just a little. "You are different, Ethan," she said finally, her voice low but steady. "I don't meet many humans who are not afraid to speak their mind or treat me as a person rather than a duty." Ethan smiled, though there was a touch of sadness in his eyes. "I'm not afraid of you," he said. "I know you're not the queen, but that doesn't mean I treat you any differently." Aliana seemed to ponder this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "It is a rare thing to find someone who sees the person instead of the role," she said, more to herself than to Ethan. The words lingered between them for a while, both of them standing in the quiet of the garden, surrounded by the bright stars above them. It was moments like this that made Ethan realize how much he had begun to value her as more than just the queen's proxy. There was a depth to Aliana that was more than just her outward appearance or her royal duties. She was thoughtful and, in a way, lonely. Ethan could see that now. He hadn't realized it before, but he began to wonder if perhaps Aliana, in her own way, had started to see him differently too. The days passed, and their interactions grew more comfortable. Aliana would often seek Ethan's company in private, away from the prying eyes of her people and the political expectations that surrounded her. They would talk about Earth's cultures, the differences between their worlds, and even share quiet moments of understanding. Despite the differences in their species, there was a growing connection, a bond that neither of them had anticipated. Then, one afternoon, after a particularly tense diplomatic meeting, Aliana invited Ethan to join her for a private lunch. "You know, I've been meaning to ask you something," she said as she passed him a small plate of food. Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's on your mind? Why did you refuse the position of personal guard to Queen Nisara?" she asked. Ethan, a bit taken aback by the question, set down his fork and looked at her. "It wasn't that I refused," he said slowly. "It's just, I didn't feel right about it. I'm here to do my job, but I'm not interested in getting tangled up in politics or royal duties. I prefer to stay out of that stuff." Aliana watched him intently, her expression thoughtful. "You are the only human I've met who doesn't care about such things. Most humans are eager for positions of power or recognition." Ethan chuckled lightly. "Maybe I'm just not cut out for all that. I'd rather make a difference where it counts, helping people in ways that matter to me." Aliana smiled, and for the first time, Ethan saw a genuine warmth in her eyes. "Perhaps that is why the council respects you," she said softly. Ethan raised his eyebrows. "The council? What do you mean?" Aliana hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a quieter voice. "The council sees something in you, Ethan. They are not easily swayed by a human, especially one who has not shown ambition or a desire for power. But your actions, your character, have begun to change their view of your kind." Ethan wasn't sure he understood. "I don't know what you mean. I'm just doing my job." Aliana's gaze softened. "That's the point. You have no agenda, no hidden motives. The council admires your integrity, something they believe is rare among other species, even their own." Ethan felt a mix of disbelief and pride. "I never expected any of that," he said, his voice quiet. "But if I'm being honest, I didn't do it for them. I did it because it felt right. And maybe that's something they see in me." Aliana nodded, her eyes gleaming with a quiet understanding. "That is exactly why they have come to admire you." Ethan had always considered himself just a regular guy, but the more time he spent with Aliana, the more he began to question that. As the days passed, the subtle gestures, the quiet smiles, and the understanding in her eyes began to draw him in. It was during one of their quiet conversations in the embassy's garden, where they often found themselves away from the eyes of the others, that Ethan felt something shift within him. "Do you ever wonder about the life you could have had?" Aliana asked softly, her voice barely more than a whisper as she gazed out at the distant stars. Ethan looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. What do you mean? I mean, she began slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of the stone bench they were sitting on. You could have chosen any path. You could have stayed with your military career. You could have risen through the ranks, taken up a high position. Ethan chuckled lightly. I guess I never saw myself as the type to chase power. Aliana's lips curved into a small smile, but there was a sadness in her eyes. And yet, you've gained something far more valuable than power. Ethan tilted his head, unsure of what she meant. What do you mean? The respect of an entire people, she said, turning to look at him, her eyes now searching his face. The council, the queen, even the others in my court, they've all seen something in you. Something they never expected to find in a human. Ethan was quiet for a moment, processing her words. I didn't do anything for them, he said, his voice calm but firm. I just did what felt right. Helping people. Standing by what's just. That's all. Aliana's eyes softened, and she reached out, placing a hand on his. And that is exactly why they have come to admire you. Ethan was silent as he processed this, feeling a wave of humility wash over him. He never expected to be in a position like this. He never expected to gain the respect of a powerful alien race simply by doing the right thing. But as he looked at Aliana, her genuine smile telling him everything he needed to know, he realized just how much he had already changed. I don't think I can ever go back to how I was before, he said quietly, looking down at their intertwined hands. Aliana squeezed his hand gently. No, she agreed softly, you can't. But that's not a bad thing, Ethan. You've become someone they never thought possible. The moment lingered between them, filled with an unspoken understanding. Ethan was more than just a human bodyguard. He was a symbol, a testament to the strength of humanity. And Aliana was no longer just the queen's proxy. She had become someone who saw Ethan for who he truly was. Not a mere human, but a man of integrity and honor, someone worth far more than his initial role had suggested. As the sun began to set over the distant horizon, casting a golden hue over the garden, Ethan realized something else. He wasn't just here to serve a diplomatic mission. He had become part of something much bigger, and the path ahead, uncertain as it was, now felt full of possibilities he had never dreamed of. He had earned the respect of the Tan Dominion, not through grand gestures, but through simple acts of kindness and honor. And maybe, just maybe, he had earned something even more valuable, the friendship and trust of someone like Aliana. What happens now? Ethan asked, his voice quiet but filled with hope. Aliana's gaze met his, and for the first time, there was no distance between them. Now, she said softly, we see where this path leads. Together. Ethan had begun to notice the subtle ways in which Aliana's demeanor had changed toward him. What started as a simple connection based on respect and duty had slowly blossomed into something more, something deeper. They continued to spend time together, learning from each other, and every passing day, their bond grew stronger. It wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. It was about mutual understanding. They walked together through the embassy's hallways, often in silence, their footsteps in perfect sync. Aliana's thoughts were never far from Ethan, and as they reached the observation deck overlooking the earth, she finally spoke. Have you ever wondered what it would be like, Ethan, to not carry the weight of expectation? Her voice was soft, almost lost in the hum of the city below. Ethan paused, looking out at the planet in the distance. I don't know. What you mean, he said, his brow furrowing. You've never had to be someone else, someone you're not, just to meet the expectations of those around you, she asked. No, he answered honestly. I've always been me. I've never been anything else, and I've never been asked to be. Aliana turned to face him, her expression contemplative. It's a luxury, she whispered, as though she hadn't meant to say it aloud. To be yourself. To not be bound by duty. Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering her words. He wasn't sure he fully understood, but there was something in her tone that made him feel as though she was revealing more than just her thoughts. She was sharing something personal, something vulnerable. He looked at her, noticing the subtle sadness in her eyes, the way she carried herself with an invisible weight. You don't have to do this, Ethan said gently. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are. I see you. Aliana's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, she let her guard down. Thank you, she replied quietly. You have no idea what that means to me. The silence between them grew, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It was a peaceful understanding that had formed between them, something that went beyond words. In that moment, Ethan realized just how much Aliena had begun to mean to him. She wasn't just the royal proxy anymore. She wasn't just someone he was assigned to protect. She was Aliena, a person with her own dreams, her own struggles, and her own complexities. And Ethan found himself wanting to help her, to stand by her, not out of duty, but because he truly cared. The days passed in a blur of meetings and cultural exchanges, her gaze drifting to the stars. When the mission is complete, when we've done our duty, what happens then? Ethan didn't have an answer at first. The truth was, he hadn't thought about it much. He had always lived in the moment, never looking too far ahead. But as he stood there with Aliena, he realized that for the first time, he was thinking about the future. A future that didn't just involve the mission, but one where he and Aliena might have a chance to explore something more, something beyond duty and expectation. I guess we see where it takes us, Ethan said finally, his voice steady but filled with a sense of hope he hadn't expected. Aliena smiled softly, the sadness in her eyes replaced by a glimmer of something new, something he hadn't seen before. Perhaps that's the best answer, she replied. As they stood there, side by side, Ethan knew that whatever came next, he was ready. He wasn't just guarding her anymore. He was walking beside her, and for the first time, he truly felt like he was part of something much bigger than himself. Ethan stood in the observation deck, staring at the vastness of space outside. The stars twinkled in the distance, and the deep silence of the universe filled the air. But inside, his mind was anything but quiet. He thought of Aliena. Their time together had been brief, but something about her, her grace, her intelligence, the way she carried herself, had changed him. He had never expected to form such a bond with someone from another world, let alone a royal. But that's what had happened. Over the past few weeks, they had shared quiet moments, discussing everything from their cultures to the challenges they faced. It had started innocently, a simple connection between two beings from different worlds. But now, it felt like something more, something that neither of them could ignore. The gentle hum of the spacecraft brought Ethan back to reality, and he turned to see Aliena approaching. Her usual poise was evident as she walked toward him, but there was a subtle change in her demeanor today. She seemed lost in thought, and for the first time, she wasn't the confident royal he had grown used to seeing. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight he hadn't heard before. "Is there something on your mind?" Ethan studied her. For a moment, there was a vulnerability in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before. She was usually so composed, so in control of her emotions. But today, she seemed different. "I could ask you the same thing," he replied, his tone gentle. Aliena paused before speaking again. I'm thinking about everything," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The council, the mission, my role as the Queen's proxy. I never imagined my life would turn out like this. Sometimes, I wonder if I've lost sight of who I really am." Ethan took a step closer to her, sensing the turmoil in her words. "You're not just a proxy, Aliena," he said quietly. "You're Aliena. I see you. Not the Queen's stand-in, not the diplomat, but the person you are." Aliena looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to find something in his words. Slowly, she nodded. I think I've been hiding behind this role for so long. I forgot what it means to just be me," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. Ethan's heart ached for her. He could see the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her, but he also saw the strength within her, the person who was more than just a symbol of power. "You don't have to hide, Aliena," he said softly. "You don't have to be anyone other than yourself. You've already shown me what kind of person you are, and that's all that matters." Aliena's gaze softened, and she took a deep breath, as if his words had given her the space to finally exhale the tension that had built up inside her. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, her voice barely audible. "I don't think I've ever felt understood like this before." Ethan smiled, stepping closer. "You're not alone, Aliena. You never have to be." They stood there for a moment, the silence between them comforting rather than awkward. Ethan could feel the connection between them, the bond that had formed in ways neither of them had expected. The galaxy might be vast, and their worlds might be different, but in this moment, standing together in the quiet of the observation deck, it felt like nothing else mattered. Aliena turned to him, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. Maybe I don't have all the answers yet, she said, her voice steady. Again, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally on the right path. Ethan met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. We'll figure it out together, he said, his voice firm with certainty. Aliana gave a small, knowing smile. Together, she repeated, and for the first time, Ethan believed it. As they stood there, side by side, it was clear to both of them that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, they both felt ready for whatever it might bring. Ethan and Aliana's bond had deepened over the past few weeks, and with each passing day, it became clear to both of them that something was growing between them, something unspoken but undeniably strong. They had spent countless hours talking about their worlds, their lives, and the challenges they faced, but lately, their conversations had become more intimate, more personal. Ethan had always prided himself on being straightforward, but with Aliana, he found himself speaking in a way he never had before. It wasn't just about duty or survival anymore. It was about them, two people from entirely different worlds, finding common ground in a universe that often seemed too vast to comprehend. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of the embassy, overlooking the shimmering lights of the city below, Aliana turned to Ethan with a question she had been holding back for days. Ethan, she began, her voice quiet, how do you do it? He looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. Do what? How do you stay so grounded? She asked, her eyes searching his face for an answer. I mean, you've been through so much, so many challenges, yet you always seem so calm, so certain of what you need to do. Ethan smiled softly, leaning back in his chair as he gazed out at the city. I don't know, he said honestly. I guess I've just learned to take things one step at a time. Life can throw a lot at you, and you can't control everything. But you can control how you respond. I focus on what matters, helping people, doing the right thing. That's always been my guide. Aliana was quiet for a moment, absorbing his words. I wish I could be more like you, she said, almost to herself. I've spent my life following orders, trying to live up to expectations, and I feel like I've lost a part of myself in the process. Ethan looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw the vulnerability she had so carefully hidden behind her royal persona. You haven't lost yourself, Aliana, he said gently. You've just been carrying a lot on your shoulders. But that doesn't mean you can't find your way back. You're more than just a figurehead. You're a person with dreams and fears, just like anyone else. Aliana met his gaze, her eyes shining with something deeper than the usual guarded composure she maintained. You make it sound so simple, she said, her voice filled with awe. But for me, it's never been simple. I've always had to be the queen's proxy, the one who represents her will, who carries the weight of an entire empire on her shoulders. How do you not feel that weight, Ethan? He paused, considering her question carefully. I guess I've never had to carry a whole empire on my back, he said with a chuckle, trying to lighten the mood. But I do know what it's like to feel like the world is weighing you down. And when that happens, you just have to remember what you stand for. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be true to yourself. Aliana's gaze softened, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace settle within her. It was as if Ethan had given her permission to stop trying to be everything for everyone and to start being herself. Maybe you're right, she said quietly. Maybe I've been trying too hard to live up to a role that isn't even mine to begin with. Ethan nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a sincerity that went beyond words. You don't have to be anyone else, Aliana. Just be you. That's more than enough. They sat in silence for a while, both of them lost in their thoughts, the soft sound of the night air filling the space between them. For the first time, Aliana felt a sense of relief wash over her. She didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders anymore. She didn't have to be perfect. She just had to be herself, and that was something she could do. As the night grew darker and the stars above twinkled brightly, Aliana finally spoke again, her voice soft but filled with newfound strength. Thank you, Ethan, she said, her words filled with gratitude. For seeing me. For helping me see myself again. Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with warmth at her words. Anytime, he replied simply. And in that moment, as they sat together, side by side, there was a sense of calm between them, a sense that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. Ethan and Aliana had reached a quiet understanding, a bond that neither had anticipated, but both felt deeply. The days continued to pass, each one drawing them closer, though they remained cautious, knowing that the delicate balance of their relationship could shift at any moment. The mission was far from over, and the complexities of their roles in the galaxy were not to be ignored. But for now, in the calm moments they shared together, it felt as though time had slowed. It was during one of these moments, a week after their conversation on the balcony, that Ethan found himself standing in the quiet corridor outside Aliana's quarters. The stars outside the windows sparkled brightly, casting a soft light into the hallway. He had been thinking about her, about everything they had shared so far, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. He turned to see Aliana walking toward him, her usual confident strides softened by something different. There was an unease in her eyes, a quiet tension in her posture. She stopped in front of him, her gaze meeting his. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Can we talk?" Ethan nodded, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "Of course," he replied, gesturing for her to step into his quarters. They walked inside, the door sliding shut behind them with a soft hiss. Aliana stood by the window, looking out at the vast expanse of space, her hands clasped in front of her. Ethan watched her quietly for a moment before speaking. "What's on your mind?" Aliana took a deep breath before turning to face him. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said before. About being true to myself," she began, her voice steady but filled with a vulnerability that Ethan had never seen before. "And I've realized something. I've spent so much of my life trying to live up to other people's expectations, trying to be what they wanted me to be. And now I don't know who I am anymore." Ethan's heart ached for her. He could see the weight of her words, the internal struggle that she had been carrying for so long. "Aliana," he said gently, taking a step closer, "you're not alone in this. I see you, the real you." She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "But I don't know how to be anyone else. I don't know what it means to just be myself." Ethan smiled softly, stepping closer until there was only a small distance between them. "It's not something you figure out overnight," he said. "But you don't have to do it alone. You've already shown me what kind of person you are, caring, strong, brave. That's who you are, Aliana." She met his gaze, and for a moment, the weight in her eyes seemed to lift. "You make it sound so simple," she whispered. "But maybe it is," he replied. "Maybe we complicate things too much by trying to live up to others' expectations. The truth is, the only person who needs to accept you is you." Aliana stood still for a moment, her gaze fixed on him as if she were searching for something in his words. Slowly, a small smile began to form on her lips. I think I'm starting to believe that," she said softly. "And maybe, just maybe, I can start to figure out who I really am." Ethan smiled back at her, the connection between them growing stronger with each passing moment. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. Just take it one step at a time." Aliana nodded, her eyes now filled with a quiet determination. "One step at a time," she repeated. They stood there for a while, the silence between them comfortable, each of them lost in their thoughts. Outside, the stars continued to shine brightly, a reminder that no matter how uncertain the future seemed, there was always a path forward. And with that understanding, Ethan felt a new sense of hope settle within him. Whatever the future held, he knew that he and Aliana would face it together. Slowly, he reached out and took her hand in his. "We'll get through this," he said, his voice steady. Aliana squeezed his hand, the warmth of her touch sending a wave of reassurance through him. "Together," she said softly. And in that moment, both of them knew that no matter the challenges they faced, they would always have each other. Ethan and Aliana had spent weeks navigating the complexities of their evolving relationship, but things were changing once again. It had been quiet in the days following their conversation, but Ethan could feel the shift. The weight of their growing connection seemed to settle into their routine, subtle but undeniable. He had always been the kind of person to focus on the task at hand, to do what was expected, but with Aliana, things felt different. Their bond was no longer just about mutual respect or duty. It was about something more, something he had not anticipated but now could not ignore. As the days wore on, their connection grew stronger, and Ethan found himself feeling more and more like a part of something greater. The Tan Dominion, the galaxy, and even his own future had seemed distant, but now everything felt closer, more tangible. The mission was still there, the expectations still present, but there was something more to hold on to. One evening, after a long day of meetings and diplomatic efforts, Ethan found himself alone in his quarters, lost in thought. The quiet hum of the station outside seemed to match his mood, and he stared out the window at the endless stars, wondering what lay ahead. The door slid open behind him, and he turned to find Aliana standing there, her silhouette framed by the light from the hallway. There was something in her posture, a shift in the way she carried herself, that caught his attention. She stepped into the room slowly, her eyes meeting his. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft but steady. "There's something I need to talk to you about." He nodded, his heart beginning to race slightly. It wasn't often that she appeared so serious, and he wondered what was on her mind. "Of course. What's going on?" She took a deep breath, clearly gathering her thoughts. "I've been thinking," she began, her gaze distant for a moment. "About everything. About my role here. About what comes next for me, for us. I've spent so long thinking I had to fit a certain mold, act a certain way, but now I'm not so sure." Ethan's brow furrowed slightly, but he stayed quiet, allowing her the space to speak. "I've been running from myself," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hiding behind expectations, hiding behind the crown, behind the role I was given. I don't even know who I am anymore, Ethan." He stood up and crossed the room toward her, his hand instinctively reaching out to her. "Aliana," he said gently, "you don't have to hide. You've never had to hide from me." She looked at him then, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but there was a glimmer of something else too, a sense of hope. "But I've been hiding from myself, Ethan. I've been so focused on what everyone else needs from me that I lost sight of what I need. What I want." Ethan took her hands in his, feeling the warmth of her touch, and gave her a soft, reassuring smile. "You don't have to have all the answers right now, but I believe in you, Aliana. You don't have to be anyone else. You've already shown me who you are, and that's more than enough." Aliana's gaze softened, and she let out a deep breath, as though the weight of her worries had lifted just a little. "I don't know what's next for me, Ethan," she said quietly. "But for the first time in a long time, I think I'm ready to find out." He nodded, squeezing her hands gently. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together," he said with quiet confidence. "You're not alone in this." Aliana smiled, her eyes meeting his with a sense of clarity he hadn't seen before. "Together," she echoed softly. They stood there for a moment, the connection between them stronger than ever. In that moment, it wasn't about the mission, the political games, or the expectations of their respective worlds. It was about them, two people, two souls, standing together in a universe that was vast and uncertain, but with each other, it felt a little smaller, a little more manageable. Whatever the future held, they knew they would face it side by side. Ethan and Aliana stood together on the balcony of the embassy, looking out at the stars that seemed so far away. The night sky, vast and endless, was both comforting and intimidating. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a sense of peace. They were no longer just two people from different worlds. They had found something deeper, a connection that defied the odds, a bond that neither had expected but both had come to cherish. As the days went on, Ethan continued his role as Aliana's protector, but now it was different. He wasn't just guarding her from physical threats. He was guarding their shared future, protecting the fragile trust that had blossomed between them. Aliana, too, found herself changing. She had begun to accept herself, to realize that she didn't need to conform to the expectations of others. She had value beyond her title, beyond the role that had been assigned to her. She was Aliana, not just a proxy. The more time they spent together, the more Ethan saw the real Aliana, the woman who was strong, compassionate, and capable of far more than she gave herself credit for. But the galaxy was vast, and the mission was far from over. There was always the looming question of what the future would hold. They had no idea where their journey would take them, but they knew one thing for certain. They would face it together. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings with the Tan Dominion's delegation, Aliana asked Ethan to accompany her to a quiet room in the embassy, away from the eyes of the other diplomats. She looked at him with a hint of uncertainty in her eyes, something she hadn't shown before. Ethan, she began, her voice soft, I've been thinking a lot about what happens after this mission is over. What happens when the Council has their answers, when the galaxy moves on, when the political games are finished. Ethan looked at her, his heart aching for the uncertainty in her voice. He stepped closer, his hand gently brushing hers. We'll figure it out, he said, his voice steady. One step at a time. Aliana met his gaze, and for a moment, the weight of the universe seemed to lift. She smiled, a small, genuine smile, something he hadn't seen in a long time. I never thought I'd be able to live my life like that, she said softly. But with you, it feels possible. Ethan reached out and gently took her hand in his. You don't have to face it alone, he said, his words firm but kind. We've already been through so much. Whatever happens next, we're in this together. Aliana's eyes softened, and she squeezed his hand gently. Together, she repeated, the word carrying a sense of finality and comfort. The silence between them felt natural now, filled with mutual understanding. Neither of them had all the answers, but they had each other. The stars outside twinkled brightly, and for a brief moment, the weight of their responsibilities seemed distant. They were just two people, standing side by side, ready to face whatever came next. Aliana looked up at the stars once more, her gaze steady. I think I'm ready for whatever comes, she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. Ethan nodded. We've already come this far. We'll take the next step, together. And with that simple promise, they knew that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it side by side. The future was uncertain, but their bond was undeniable. They were no longer two individuals in separate worlds. They were partners, and in that moment, that was enough.